Hi, and welcome to my completed pages video for August 2025. If you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Ina. If not, welcome back. This month I colored a total of 13 pages and was able to tick off 4 pages from my 25 pages for 2025 list. In addition, I now have at least 2 colored pages in all of my books. That's great. Okay, let's begin. I started with the page that goes the quickest. I worked in my monthly page in Ivy and the Inky Butterfly by Joanna Basford. This was the next page I had lined up. I'm working through this book from front to back. For this frame, I originally didn't want to use gold, so I looked through my Castle Arts metallic colored pencils to find an alternative color. As you can hopefully see, I used 4 different metallic blue shades that gradually get lighter from the corners towards the center. For these small highlights, I also added a red metallic shade. However, there are still these flourishes left, and I eventually decided to do them in a yellow gold. At least I didn't use the same metallic gold as on several previous pages, like on this double page, for example, but opted for different colors. I use this gold combination from the metallic set on the title page as well. But for this page, I used some yellow shades from the Castle Art Soft Touch set. Okay, this was a very quick page in Ivy and the Inky Butterfly by Joanna Basford. Then for the second page I picked another one that's relatively quick, from the unfortunately AI-generated coloring book Verzauberte Zuflucht. As I mentioned, it's AI-generated, which is why I wouldn't recommend it. For the first time I completely based a page with alcohol markers. And I must admit, I liked it a little too much. Now I like to get more single-sided books, so I can do this more often. The alcohol markers are the inexpensive ones from Action, which I showed in my last haul. For shading, I went over it with the Castle Art Soft Touch pencils. And yes, even though you can see some undefined objects here, it was still fun to work on. I really didn't expect to enjoy using alcohol markers this much, especially considering they're just cheap ones. You can see on the dots of the large mushroom house here, there are always double lines, which I try to cover with a white gel pen. I attempt to shade the dots a bit, but because the AI created these double lines in some places, it looks a bit untidy now. But well, that's just how it is. This page was also the first one this month from my 25 pages for 2025 list, for the prompt, the last page in a coloring book. Alright, that was Verzauberte Zuflucht. Next I want to color a page with crayons, which I did in this Deco Time adult coloring book. especially this one with the hippie van. This page is also from my 25 pages for 2025 list, for the prompt a page with a rainbow. As I mentioned in my planning video for August, when I pulled the prompts at the beginning of the year, I didn't have a better page with a rainbow in all my books. That's why I chose this one, because with a bit of imagination, it looks the most like a rainbow. My plan was actually to lay down a base with crayons and then add shading with colored pencils. That didn't work out very well. I have to say, I've got different crayons from various brands, all regular children crayons, and they are quite different, even though they are all just crayons. What worked the best for me was trying to shade directly with the crayons themselves, and then going over them with colored pencils. I'm showing a video here. Basically, with the colored pencils, I mainly smeared the crayons, which resulted in a somewhat even surface. It worked better with some areas and less with others. But the crayons don't feel as waxy anymore when you touch them after going over it with colored pencils. I think I'll use this method again, not regularly, but from time to time, especially for large areas. It's actually a pretty good method for that. However, I probably use it more in the cheaper coloring books like this one and my 2 Disney coloring books. I can't tell you exactly which crayons I used, since some of them don't even have the paper wrappers anymore. I think 1 or 2 of them were the well-known Crayola crayons. Maybe I should create an overview for myself of which ones are good for creating gradients and which aren't, and which ones you can color over with colored pencils and which ones you can't. The colored pencils were all no-name brands. I also tried the Castle Art Soft Touch and Gold, but they didn't work any better. I'm sure it would work better with Neocolor One and Prismacolor. So that was this page in this adult coloring book. The 4th page is from the book Morgentau, or in English Twilight Garden by Maria Trolle. And it's the first page from my background video using narrow washi tape. This one with the flowers. If you'd like to see how I created the background, as well as backgrounds in 2 upcoming books, I've linked the video here. I painted the entire page with watercolors, without focusing on the motif. And of course, I masked off the frame beforehand using washi tape. Then I added some paint splatters on top and simply shaded over it with the colored pencils, always checking which colors were already present in the base and which color pencils would complement them. As usual, I used my Castle Art Soft Touch pencils, and for the centers of the flowers I used a golden gel pen. It was something completely different, but I really like the result. And I definitely try this technique again. That was the page from Twilight Garden by Maria Trolle. Next is already the 5th page. I colored the owl from Geheimnisvolle Krafttiere, or in English Mystic Animals by Stratton Peterson. Just like with the snake from my last page in this book, It was a bit time consuming to figure out exactly what kind of animals these are, because I like to color these pages realistically. The owl was relatively easy. It's a barn owl. The mice were no problem either. They're just mice. But identifying this moth and the matching caterpillars was a bit tricky. In the end, I decided on the Tau Emperor moth. It fits with these caterpillars that have all these little white red appendages, and the pattern matches reasonably well. Maybe there's another one that's even more similar, but I didn't find one during my research. I had also no idea what kind of flowers these were supposed to be. The yellow blossoms look a bit like evening primrose, which makes sense because it blooms at night. But actually, the blossoms aren't at mouse height. They're usually about a meter or more off the ground. And for the purple flowers, I have no idea what they're supposed to be. But I thought the purple color fit quite well. The leaves of the flowers look a bit like those of Lily of the Valley, but I couldn't find a matching flower with such leaves. Well, it doesn't always have to be 100% realistic. I'm pleased with the overall result. I used my Castle Art soft touch pencils, and for these rays here I used a glitter marker from the set I showed in my last haul. You can see a little bit of the glitter, but because the area are so small, it's unfortunately not as noticeable as I hoped. Still, I really like the page overall. That was the owl from Mystic Animals by Stratton Peterson. This page was also from my 25 pages in 2025 list, and for the prompt, a page with multiple animals. Next up is Creattopia by Vex. This page is also from my background video. I used washi tape again, and for the background itself I used Castle Art's watercolor pencils. It now looks a bit like the turtle is trapped in a net. That wasn't my intention when I created this pattern. I only noticed it after I finished the background. But well, unfortunately, many turtles do end up in fishing nets, whether active ones or lost ghost nets, where they die or swim around entangled in them. If you like, you can view this page as a reference to that, or simply see it as a pattern in the background. I then colored the turtle itself with Castle Art soft touch pencils. I really like the colors I choose for these doodles, as well as the contrast between the rather realistic turtle and the colorful doodles. That was Creattopia by Vex. The next page is from the book In der Natur or Botanicum by Maria Trolle. In this book, I colored my first galaxy background on the page with these sleeping petrified trolls. I also made a video about it, so if you like to see how I colored this page, feel free to check the video. For the background I used soft pastels, and for the rest of the picture I applied a mix of Castle Art Soft Touch and Harmonious pencils. For the stars I used both a white gel pen from Sakura and white acrylic paint. That was Botanicum by Maria Trolle. The next page is from Seasons by Hannah Carlson, and it's a double-page spread featuring this portrait here. At first I wasn't really sure how to color it. I considered giving her hair a reddish-orange copper tone, but then I didn't really know how to proceed with the rest. Sure, the leaves would be green, the branches brown, but how should I color the birds? What color should I choose for the flowers and her clothing? I wasn't quite sure. I then browsed Pinterest for dreamy, whimsical portraits and found a couple of underwater portraits, whose color palettes I really liked. One of them also featured reddish-orange copper hair, with the background shaded in water blue turquoise hues. But then the question was how to apply this color palette to the illustration. Maybe I wouldn't color her hair in reddish-orange after all, but instead use that for the flowers, keeping her hair brown and perhaps her outfit in orange. But then, how should I color the flowers on the other page? If you look closely, the flowers are different from each other, and the leaves vary as well. Some have bold mirabils, while others don't. And above all, I had no idea how to color the birds. So I decided to Google colorful birds for inspiration, and discovered the bee-eater, the one you see in the photo here. I thought the colors of this bird would be great inspiration for a color palette, along with skin tones and a few pink shades. I then set aside my original inspiration photo, thinking I could use it for another page, and decided to use the bee-eater as my new inspiration. Of course, the birds on the page don't look like bee-eaters. I didn't believe there's any real bird that resembles them exactly. So I didn't color the birds exactly like the bee-eater in the photo, but used it purely as a color reference. I also didn't want to color all the flowers on one side with the same color combination, and the other side differently. Instead, I aimed for some variation. That's why I used lighter and darker reddish-orange tones for the flowers on the left, and color some of the other flowers in darker pinks and others in lighter shades. I also ensured that the turquoise from the bird appears again on the ribbon and the medallion, creating a cohesive look. The orange-brown from the bee-eater is reflected in the hair, the flowers and the birds themselves. The yellow appears both in the background, the flower centers, and again in the birds, just like the other colors. In general, it was important to me that the two pages form a cohesive image, rather than looking like two separate ones. For the background, I used my Jackson watercolor crayons, and for coloring, I used the Castle Art Soft Touch pencils. I encountered some challenges with the skin. I wanted to color it using the Castle Arts watercolor pencils, but one of the pencils appeared too yellowish compared to the others, especially around the nose area. Additionally, I realized too late that my reference photo had unsuitable lighting. But then I had already started shading, so I tried to salvage it as best as I could. But I think for my first portrait it's quite okay. To finish the pages I used a gold and silver gel pen for all the little dots. and added highlights to the eyes with the Sakura Jelly Roll. With a double-page spread in Seasons by Hannah Carlson, I completed all my planned pages for August. However, I managed to finish a few more pages, starting with one in Vintage Flowers from the publisher Busse Seewald. I colored this lily here. I had already created the background in my video featuring the washi tape. And by the end of the month, I managed to fully color the page. Initially, I wanted to make the lilies orange, but to create more contrast with the background, I decided to go with red instead. I'll probably color these lilies on the opposite page in orange, and might add a red-pink background. For the lily, I used the Castle Arts Gold pencils. I really like this book because it often features just one flower, allowing for creative freedom in the background. That was another completed page in Vintage Flowers. Then I colored a page in Enchanted Earth by Melpomene Chatzipanagiotou. This one was the last book where I had only one completed page. Now I have at least 2 colored pages in all of my books. For this one, I choose a summery tropical island that also resembles a kind of a fruit basket. I primed the page using some old felt tip pens I still had. I applied the ink onto a thick plastic sheet and then transferred it onto the paper with a damp brush. After that, I went over it with Castle Arts soft touch pencils. As you can see here, I used a lot of white gel pen for the water and added a bit of gold for the stars. I'm not sure how well the background shown up on camera, but on the left side I used a very light yellow soft pastel, and on the right side a very light blue for contrast. This way the blue from the water is mirrored on the opposite side, and the color from the sand is reflected on the other side. This was Enchanted Earth by Melpomene Chatzipanagiotou. The month still wasn't over when I finished that page, though I thought I'd do another page in my somewhat beloved and at the same time hated glitter coloring book. This book has already fallen apart, so I've now put the pages into plastic sheets in a folder. Here I did my 4th page from my 25 pages for 2025 list. Specifically these flowers for the prompt a predominantly floral page. Again, it was quite a problem, just like with the previous pages, because this coated paper is incredibly smooth. I'll take the page out of the sleeve so you can see it better. This paper is so smooth that even the alcohol markers dry very blotchy. Where the glitter is, it's not quite as smooth, so it works somewhat better. But yeah, I think it looks good from a distance. You just shouldn't look too closely, which is why I didn't do a background, because it would have turned out really blotchy. Unfortunately, nothing inspect alcohol markers stick on this paper. Since I still had one day left in August, I decided to do another quick page. This man here with the bird. I think he kind of looks like a sailor, with the bird, the sweater and that hat. You can see here again that blending, especially where there's no glitter, doesn't really work at all, because this paper is so incredibly smooth. But again, from the distance it's okay. Up closely through, it's better not to look so closely. With that one, I've completed my 5 pages in this book. I want to complete 5 pages in all my books this year. I've already achieved that here, so that's great. So, what are my favorite pages for the months? I definitely say the double-page spread in Seasons by Hannah Carlson. But I also really like The Sleeping Trolls in Botanicum by Maria Trolle. And The Owl in Mystic Animals. Which page do you like the best? If you want to know which pages I planned for September, check out my coloring plan video. I hope you enjoyed this video and I see you in the next one. Bye!